The U.S. is considering a potential military strike against Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says it is unmistakable what's happening in regards to the recent attack on the oil tankers in the Gulf of Oman. To tell us more about the next steps and what they are for the Trump administration is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, the U.S. is doubling down as more nations are pointing fingers at Iran for the recent oil tanker attacks.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty obvious that it was the Iranian regime, and the U.S. is not going to shy away from pointing those fingers at the Iranian regime and to really corner them or to continue to corner them for behavioral change. I mean, yes, there have been threats of targeted attacks against Iran. Mike Pompeo is leaving all options on the table, as any U.S. leader should. But the conversation is not really about starting war. I don't think either side really wants to do that. But the conversation is definitely about who has the upper hand, and there will be this exchange of bullying comments between both sides until, we see, who's on top. Well, the sanctions are working. So we know that the U.S. has succeeded in economically, at the very least, punishing the Iranian regime and punishing them in a way that is incredibly targeted, meaning they're hitting the sectors that matter to the regime. So we're talking oil, banking, trading, weapons, technology, etc., that really matter to the growth and to the expansion of the regime's agenda in the region and internally. With the people, yes, the sanctions are also working, but how will the Iranian regime handle that when the people are on the streets? So they've been treading a bit more softly against the retaliations on the people, although some people in the country think otherwise because they've been the victims of a lot of the crackdowns. But regardless, I think the bottom line right now is that the U.S. is maintaining constant pressure. They want to be very consistent in their messaging, and I think they don't want this to lead to war, and their open message is not for regime change, but for behavioral change.
Now, the U.S. is considering sending additional military force to the Middle East amid tensions with Iran. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it looks like we do need it, though, because although there is no heightened, or I shouldn't say heightened, but there's no actual war or, heated conflict between the two sides, there's definitely these little one-offs that we kind of excuse here and there, meaning there are reports that, for example, the Iranian regime tried to strike down a U.S. drone right before they hit those oil tankers in the Sea of Oman. What was that all about, right? What do these provocations really mean, and why is the Iranian regime really trying to stir things up in the region? So perhaps having a presence there is that carrot stick kind of diplomacy where you have to show up, you have to have a strong message, and you have to follow up on that message. I think that what the U.S. has done in recent years is, even when there was a strong message, it wasn't followed up. It wasn't, there was no reinforcement of that message. So here you have Donald Trump, very strong foreign policy, very strong words, but he wants those strong actions to follow up those strong words.
Now, still with Iran, the Muslim nation is threatening to scale back its commitment to the nuclear deal. Lisa, it's announcing unlimited increase in uranium enrichment as tensions flare with the Trump administration.
Yeah, this is amazing, right? So the U.S. pulled out of the nuclear deal last May, so it's over a year now. And the Iranian regime's like, well, nanny, nanny, poo, poo, what we're going to do is do exactly what you didn't want us to do, right? So it's mind-boggling because here in the U.S., we're gearing up for a presidential election in 2020, and you have almost all the Democrat candidates on one side, and we have so many of them, you can hardly keep track. They're saying that they will get right back into the Iran deal. And, the question, or the elephant in the room that no one is asking these candidates is, what was so great about the Iran deal? What did we gain from the Iran deal? Was it effective in curbing the Iranian regime's behavior in any ways? Did we get them any further from the goalposts that they have? We already know that they're at the 1 yard line. Did they get any further in pushing their agenda through? As it even was, the Iran nuclear deal put them at this sunrise clause, which allowed them to stay at that 1 yard line until they could push themselves through. And a decade, as we know, goes by so incredibly fast. So yeah, we're in a very interesting place where the Iranian regime is showing the world where they stand, what their behavior is, and these threats are not helping their case to have normalized relations with the U.S. anytime soon, at least under this president.
And solid football reference there. I love that. Lisa, Israel is attending a U.S.-hosted Middle East economic conference. It'll focus on the Palestinian economy as part of Trump's Middle East peace plan.
Yes, so this economic conference of sorts is being hosted in Bahrain. It's a kickoff to the Middle East peace plan that has been the architect of that plan being the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, among others, who have really drawn up a very thoughtful, nuanced Middle East peace plan to finally, hopefully, optimistically, reduce tensions between the Palestinians and the Israelis, to have some sort of comprehensive peace plan that will hopefully be enthusiastic to both sides. And this economic conference is supposed to look at the future of the Middle East in a holistic way. Now, we already know that the Palestinians have refused to go. They're very angry at the Arab nations that are participating, but we do not know that the Israelis will be in attendance. The U.S. obviously will be in attendance. We are very, very happy that the Bahrainis have decided to partner up with the U.S. in hosting this conference. And I actually will be traveling to D.C. next week to hear more about the peace plan, to work with a very small group of communications leaders that work with the president and Jared Kushner on the Middle East peace plan, to roll this out and to hear more about it. Again, it's not very encouraging when we know that the Palestinians have already said that they're not interested. They don't even know what's in the deal, and they're not interested. So we'll see. I mean, if this is more of the same, I think it doesn't really behoove the Palestinians to knock this one away. But, as we know, the victimhood and this ability to just play out the clock has been with the Palestinian leadership. I think the Palestinian people definitely deserve more, but their leadership, meaning Hamas and others, have definitely done a disservice to the people of the Palestinian regions, and we shall see what happens this week.
Lisa, you really have to feel for the people of Argentina. A major blackout left millions of people without power. Argentina is not ruling out a cyber attack and its major power outage.
Yes, well, this is a power outage affecting almost 50 million people. I mean, think about how expansive that is, and countries like Uruguay, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, as you mentioned, all being affected. I mean, the people of that region have said that they were literally in elevators, on escalators, in the middle of what they were doing, and everything just went black. It's a lot of people affected, a lot of life affected, mundane things that they can no longer do. The pictures coming out are horrific. And as you said, that region of the world is already, trying to absorb immigrants coming in from Venezuela. There's a lot of weakness in Latin America to build up. And this is obviously something that is a setback. Now, Argentina has said that we will not rule out a cyber attack on our grid system. This is something that the U.S. we talk about all the time. I know Canada is also affected in the Western grid that we talk about, and how easy, for lack of a better word, it would be for enemies to hit this grid and cause a complete blackout. And we're talking about hospital monitors and defibrillators, and really stop life. And that's, aside from what happens in Wall Street and electric cars and things like that would be quite dangerous and a big hit to our economy. This is what could potentially happen. So looking at Latin America, I think it's very smart of Argentina to not rule out any kind of attack, because this is how it would go down. So I think it's interesting for them to say that. Maybe they know something that we don't know. We'll have to see what the investigations report back. But until then, they'll probably need a lot of electricity to start those investigations. We wish them a lot of luck in dealing with this.
Lisa, the former president of Sudan, Omar al-Bashir, has appeared in public for the first time since he was overthrown in a coup in April. Lisa, he was driven from office thanks to corruption charges against him.
Yeah, this is quite a sensitive topic, as I think many people are following this awful, awful situation in Sudan, the awful poverty, the lack of humanitarian assistance. I mean, it just can't get to the people fast enough. And you have, Bashir, who was ousted from government, reappearing, causing a lot of sensitivities to come out again. I mean, the fact that they were able to overthrow his regime was a huge feat. But what's next? I mean, what's next for a nation that doesn't really have the ability or the tools to nation build? Will this create a political vacuum that will make it far worse for the people of Sudan and the region? Will this create even more poverty? You can connect this to the Darfur crisis and how they are still trying to pick up the pieces from the Darfur genocide, and how this latest protests and kind of upheaval in the capital city of Khartoum has actually affected Darfur, because the aid can't get through. You have even more mouths to feed. You have more hands extended for help. And again, this is, you can't really over exaggerate or overestimate what's going on in Sudan in the aftermath of what went down in that country.
Lisa, we had close to 2 million people lining the streets in Toronto recently, celebrating the Toronto Raptors NBA championship. Pretty exciting stuff. But there were also close to 2 million who took to the streets of Hong Kong recently, but they were not celebrating.
No, and it's interesting because this is morphing into a bit more than just a protest against a law. We spoke about this last week, Hal, about the extradition law that would send people's loved ones and people in jail over to China to be tried. And of course, there is a fear there of, will they ever come back? Will they get a fair trial, etc.? And that's a very plausible thought and fear. But now you have people on the streets really protesting their current situation. You have China really taking advantage of everyone now, whether it be the global economy and their role in all of that, which Donald Trump is trying to curb, or you have, what they've done to Taiwan in the region, Hong Kong in the region. I think the people of Hong Kong are coming out in the streets. Yes, the impetus of all of this was the extradition law that they are very much against. But the follow-up of this is to really protest the status quo and to say we can't take it anymore, and we won't take it anymore. We're our own people, we're our own entities, and we should be treated as such.
The Communist Party in China says it's ready for a long economic battle with the United States. Lisa, I'm looking at the markets, and that's not a good thing for any of us.
No, not good for anyone. And it's interesting because, this goes without saying, right? Because they have elongated this battle between the United States and themselves. I think Donald Trump's calculation was that the U.S. has the upper hand. We have the leverage. So the Chinese will come back to the negotiating table and agree to everything again. So how Donald Trump summarized this situation this last week in a press conference from the White House just a few days ago, he said, basically, we sat down, we agreed to the things that the U.S. said these are basically non-negotiable. We have to negotiate on these few points. China agreed, and then China said no. And you don't renegotiate what you already negotiated. Those are the words that Donald Trump used, and that's his sentiment on this. He thinks that the U.S. has the upper hand, meaning, well, the whole global economy has the upper hand on China. If they want to play fair, if they want to play, in the international economy, they have to play fair, and that means, no plagiarism and no stealing of intellectual properties, and you can't cheat on tariffs and taxes and import taxes and export taxes and things like that. But it seems like China has gotten away with this for such a long time that they're not willing to really budge on it. So I think when they put out a note or a headline saying that they want to really drag this out, we should take their word for it, because that's exactly what's going on here.
The U.S. is also in a trade war with India. The Asian nation recently announced tariffs on U.S. products, and we're talking about retaliatory tariffs on 28 U.S. goods.
Yes. So as we know, Donald Trump, the businessman, he punishes with tariffs. That's his thing, tariffs and sanctions. And when in doubt, he applies those tariffs like he does with India or China or anyone who's not playing fairly. And now India said, you know what, we'll just put the tariffs right back on. So as you said in your previous question, this is not good for anyone. the least of whom would be Donald Trump, who is running for re-election. And I think the economy, which is his strongest suit, I would say, if you want to put that probably up against also his foreign policy, is where people will be micro focused. I think if the people here in the United States are happy with their mortgage and happy with their taxes and happy with what's left for them in the bank, they will vote positively for Donald Trump. And if it's the other way around, then whoever's running against him will get the vote. And I think, I've always felt for the last few months that if he can turn this China thing around, and you can add India now to the list, but I don't think India is going to be as big of an issue for us. But if he can turn this around and strike a good deal with the Chinese, then he'll be in a better place for re-election.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks, Lisa.
My pleasure.